Hey everybody, we're here again to talk a little bit about supply. We talked last week about demand. This week we're going to be talking about supply. And this lecture is a little bit lengthy, but we're going to make our way through it. Make sure you're taking your notes and getting everything down. All right, so let's start off with our targets as usual. Okay, so target for knowledge is that you understand the relationship between price and quantity supplied. Reasoning target is that you can explain why supply curves might shift. The skill is that you can draw shifts in supply curves. All right. So the essential question for lesson 1 of chapter 5 is, what are the basic differences between supply and demand? So I want you to go ahead and make sure that you write this at the top of your notes or type it at the top of your notes. And I want you to come back at the end of the lecture after you're all done with your notes and go ahead and answer that question and make sure you've got all that highlighted. All right? Okay, so here we go. All right, so what is supply? Well, supply is defined as the amount of a product offered for sale at all possible prices in a market at a given point in time. Okay, so it's how much product that a producer is willing to sell at a specific price. Okay. So in this case, remember where demand, I told you, was all about the consumer. Supply is all about the producer. Okay. So we're going to be having a look at this from the producer's point of view, which is something we're not used to doing. We're used to looking at everything from the consumer point of view because we are all consumers. So in this case, we're going to have to shift our brain a little bit into producer mode and pretend like we're a business owner that is selling something, okay? And so you're going to have to think in that kind of mindset when we're talking here about supply, okay? So the definition of the law of supply is that if all things are equal, right? If all things are equal, right? Producers will supply more of a product if its price increases and less of a product as its price decreases. Okay, so notice the arrows here, and I did color code them on purpose. Okay, and hang on a second, because I talk with my hands, so I need to adjust this so that I can see, you can see my hands. All right, here we go. All right, so looking at these arrows here, right? Okay, so notice that they are color coded. Okay, so when we talk about that, when producers will supply more, so supply will increase as the price increases. Okay, and then it will decrease, it will get less when the price decreases. So now if you remember from demand was the opposite. Okay, demand said that people will demand, consumers will demand more. Okay, demand more, demand will go up as the price decreases, right? So we had what we called an inverse relationship between price and demand. Law of supply, it's a direct relationship. So what happens to price happens to supply, okay? Instead of demand, which was opposite, right? So here's an example, okay? Higher prices basically are an incentive for suppliers. So suppliers are more willing to sell more product at a higher price. Why? Because they can make more money off of it, okay? So then lower prices for the same item deter suppliers. So suppliers will tend to hold stuff back. So it's one of the reasons why when you see sales happen, sales don't happen usually as they're introducing a new product. Sales usually happen when they've introduced the product, it's been out for a while, and they're just not seeing the sales that they want. And so they drop the price, but they might hold back some product for a while. Okay. And in the instances where you see a product goes on sale as it, when it's brand new, as it's first being introduced, it's because they're only allowing a certain amount out at that sale price, and they're holding back the rest of their supply until that first lower priced amount is wiped out, taken care of. Then they will release the rest at the full price. Okay. So why do they do that? Easy. Remember, profit motive, right? Profit motive. There you go. They're going to make more money off of selling things at the higher price than they will selling them at the lower price. So that's what they want to do. All right, so supply schedule. Supply schedule is a chart just like this. Okay, it's a listing of the various quantities of a particular product that a producer would supply at all possible prices in the market. Okay, so just like the demand schedule, here we have the supply schedule. It looks the same. You've got price on one side, you've got the quantity supplied on the other. Notice, okay, as the prices go down, so does the quantity supplied. So again, this is the reverse from what we saw with demand. With demand, we saw that as the prices went down, the quantity demanded increased. Okay, so that 4 would have been down here at the bottom. Think about it. Wouldn't you want to buy more of something if it was only $1 versus if it were $9? But if you're selling something, you're the producer and you're selling something, you'd be more willing to sell and put out more product if people are willing to pay $9 than you would for $1. Think about that. So this is what a supply curve looks like. So once you take all that data and you graph it, this is what it looks like. Now notice also, okay, remember the demand curve went this way, okay, it sloped downward. Remember down with demand? Well, this is supply. Supply goes upward, okay? This is an upward slant for supply. So supply curve is an upward slant, okay, unlike demand, which was a downward slant, okay? Very important to know so that you could visually recognize a supply curve. If I didn't have that S on there, would you be able to identify this as a supply curve? You might have to do that for a quiz or for a test at the end of the chapter. Oh, yep. Okay, there are two types of supply curves. There's an individual supply curve, which represents decisions of one producer. Okay, and then there's the market supply curve, which represents decisions of all producers of a particular product all across the board. Okay. Supply can change in two ways, and this is a change in quantity supplied. This is what we referred to before with demand as a movement. This is a movement along the supply curve. Okay, so for example, with lemonade, the price for lemonade might change from $1 to $2. Okay, and so all we're going to see is a movement from $1 to $2. Okay, on the quantity supplied. Okay, so see how we have that little change right there. Okay, this is the movement. Okay, movement along there. That's quantity supplied. Okay. Okay, so then a change in supply is the shift of the entire supply curve either right or left. Okay, so remember, if we shift to the right, that's an increase. If we shift to the left, it's a decrease. Okay, so here's your supply curve, right? Okay, so you're going to draw that supply curve, and then I want you to draw an increase in supply on there. Okay, and so it should look something a little bit like this. Okay, this is an increase in supply. Notice that the whole curve shifted to the right. That's an increase. Okay, now if you were going to draw a decrease, which side of this original curve would that decrease curve go? Yeah, it would go over to the left, so the opposite of this one. Okay, so your second one should go over there. All right, pause here so that you can draw those into your notes. All right, continuing on. Increases in supply. There are count them, 6 factors that will cause supply to increase. First of all, cost of production goes down. Okay, so that means that it costs less to make the item. Materials, wages, operating costs are some of the things that might change, might get decreased in order to make it cheaper to produce the product. Okay, then that will cause supply to increase. You can make more for less, so the supply goes up. Okay. If technology improves, okay, New computers, new software, new machinery could make it easier to produce more products. Again, increasing efficiency. If sellers expect good things in the future, that's going to increase the supply. More sellers enter the market. Okay, that means that there's new businesses entering the market, then there's going to be obviously more supply there available. And if opportunities in different markets look bad, that's going to increase the supply in your particular market. And lastly, favorable natural events. We have good weather, lots of rain, good sunshine. It increases the amount of oranges that we're able to produce here, right? So it increases the supply of the citrus. Nice. All right. There's also 6 factors that cause a supply to decrease. And it's basically all the same factors, just happening in reverse, right? So if the cost of production increases, if wages, materials, operating costs go up, then generally speaking, a producer is going to produce less because they have less money to work with. If technology becomes outdated, then they can't work as efficiently. They need to replace that material. That means cost of production goes up. So these two can kind of go hand in hand. If sellers expect bad things to happen in the future, they will decrease their supply. Okay. If you work in the construction business and you think that less people are going to be buying houses, you're going to stop building houses. Supply is going to decrease. If sellers leave the market, all right, one store goes out of business, that means there's less supply that is out there in the market. If opportunities in another market are good, then that means more people are going to be buying from a different market than yours. That's less money to go into your market, and you're going to decrease supply because you're not going to be selling as much. And if unfavorable natural events happen, when we have a freeze around here and it freezes those oranges and then they go bad, then that means the supply of oranges decreases, right? Or a hurricane in Florida causes a loss of lots of oranges. That's a decrease in the supply. That happened in Texas. I didn't realize this until this freeze event just happened. Texas is actually third as far as big suppliers of citrus. Who would have known? Texas. I would have never heard that before. Texas and oil, Texas and beef. Yeah. Never heard Texas and oranges. So there's going to be a shortage in citrus supply coming up this year because of the freeze that happened, that odd freeze that happened in Texas was a couple of weeks ago. Excuse me. So when the supply curve shifts, it affects the quantity and the price, okay? So here on your notes, you can see that, all right? And decide whether quantity and price increase or decrease for each scenario, all right? And actually, I'm just going to skip past this here. There we go. Okay. So that's pretty much it for today. We've hit those targets, hopefully. And remember, now you need to go back and answer the question. Answer the essential question. Make sure you do that. All right. And that's it. That's the end for today. All right. Have a great day, and we'll see you again next time around.